So in this lesson, we're going to look at conditional statements again, if statements, and we're also going to look at control flow of our program. So what I've got here at the beginning is I've imported my scanner, and then in the main method, I've instantiated a scanner object called keyboard, and we're going to prompt the user to enter an integer and store that integer as num. Okay, so next, we'll scroll down just a little bit and take a look at the conditions. So if statements control the program flow by only executing if the Boolean condition is met. So inside of the parentheses for this if statement, I have num equals 10, right? That is comparing the value that the user input with the integer 10. And this returns either true or false, right? Either the number is 10 or the number isn't 10, in which case it would be false. So if the number is 10, Java is going to execute the next line following that condition. So it's going to increment num by 1, okay? Then Java is going to come down to the next line. It's going to output our print statement. Okay, then it comes to line 26 and reads this condition, is num greater than 10, right? If that was true, then it would execute the next line following that parentheses. If it's false, it's going to skip that next line, right? And it's going to come down to the next line, okay? And look at that condition, and so on and so on. So Java executes the next statement immediately following the if condition, okay, if that evaluates to true. Okay, for multiple statements to execute, they must be enclosed in braces following the if condition. Remember, in Python, indentation indicates a block of code, but in Java, spacing doesn't matter. So if I wanted these two lines of code to be part of this if condition, I would need to enclose them inside of open close curly braces, right? Those braces then make that one block of code that will execute if that condition is true. Okay, so it tells us on line 18 that this code has no syntax errors or runtime errors, but it does have semantic or logical errors. Right? Semantic errors are not going to throw error codes that prevent our code from compiling or from running appropriately, but the program is not going to work as intended when there are logical errors. Okay, we won't get the result that we expect. So pause the video, take a minute to code trace your way through lines 22 through 31 and see if you can figure out what those semantic or logical errors are and how to correct them. Okay, then you can start the video again and we'll talk through it. So in our program here, if we compile, right, we don't have any errors come up. And then we're going to go ahead and run. So I'm going to enter the integer 10. And as we come up, now we can see you entered 10, so it met that first condition as true, and it executed these two lines that we put together in the braces. So fun fact, 10 plus 1 equals 11. But now when we come down, if num is greater than 10, right, num is currently holding the value that was incremented on line 23. So even though the user's number, which is what we intended to use for the comparison, that got replaced with an 11, and it says 11 is greater than 10. But we intended the comparison to be from the user's input. So we can see where this semantic or logical error is occurring in our code. Okay, so some ways that we can address that would be, instead of using if here, we're going to use else if. Okay? And what the else does is it says, if this first condition is false, then check the next condition. Okay? If the first condition is true, the else is going to be ignored, and it won't be checked. Okay, so now we'll come down to our next line here, and we've got two things that we want to have happen, right? We've got to clean up some spacing here to see them a little more clearly, but lines 27 and 28, those are the two things that we want the output to be if the number is greater than 10. So we're going to put those inside of braces so that that block of code is now following the condition for line 26. Okay, then our final comparison doesn't really need an else if, right? We don't need to say what that comparison is, because if the number isn't 10 and it's not greater than 10, then it's just an else, right? We don't have to specify that the number is less than 10, because that's the only possible outcome. Okay? And the else is followed by two lines of code that we want to have encased inside of braces so that those two things are going to execute when that condition, when it comes to that condition. So let's go ahead and compile, see if we made any syntax boo-boos. Okay, that looks good, and then we'll run. Now we'll enter our integer 10, and now it's running as intended. You entered 10, fun fact, 10 plus 1 equals 11. Okay? If we run it again, and this time we'll enter 8, right? Now it says you entered 8, which is less than 10. Now let's compare the two numbers. So we can see now that our program's semantic or logical errors have been corrected. Okay, let's scroll down a little bit and we'll take a look at our ternary operator. So I'm going to remove this comment and place that back up here so that we can see the code underneath. Okay, so the Java ternary operator is the question mark. So if we come down and we look at line 46, we see string output equals, here's our condition, this is the if. So num1 greater than num2, that's what we're looking to see if it's true or false. Okay, then the question mark means do either of the next two things based on the result of that condition. So that's our ternary, either do this or do this. If it's true, the condition, num1 is greater than num2, then we're going to have the greater than symbol stored as our string output. But if that condition is false, then what comes after the colon, which is the less than equal to operator, that's what's going to be stored as the string output. Okay, so the condition comes first, then the ternary operator. Then what you want the result to be if it's true, a colon, followed by what you want the result to be if it's false. Okay, so let's scroll down just a little bit and we'll look at what follows. So now if num1 is equivalent to num2, then we're going to output they are equal. If num1 is not equal to num2, then we're going to do another comparison. Okay, so the max is going to be if num1 is greater than num2, there's our ternary operator. If it's true, num1 will get stored as the max, right? If it's false, then that means num2 is the greater number, and that's the value that will get stored as the max. Okay, and then we would output that maximum. So let's go ahead and run, and we'll take a look at that ternary operator in action. Okay, so we're prompted to enter an integer. Let's put in 6. Okay, it says you entered 6, which is less than 10. Now let's compare two numbers. So we're going to enter two integers with a space between. So let's do 4 and 10. Okay, now we have output 4 is less than or equal to 10, so the maximum is 10. Now let's try it with numbers that are greater. So we'll start with 5, and then we'll compare 8 and 4. So the 8 is greater than the 4. And there's our result. 8 is greater than 4, so the maximum is 8. Okay, then we'll run it one more time where we make the values equal. So we'll put in a 10, maybe we entered 10. Now we'll do 10 and 10. And it says 10 is less than or equal to 10. They are equal. Okay, so that's using the ternary operator with our conditions resulting in true or false.